Alright, so one of my favorite things about the NFL season is really just predicting players who I think are going to break out in the upcoming season and just take massive leaps in their game and just have career seasons overall. And in today's video, we're going to be going over one player from every single NFL team who I think is going to break out in the upcoming season. Before this video does get started, I do want to say, please check out my podcast if you guys haven't already. The link to it is in the description below, and I do want to try and grow that thing, so it would mean a lot to me if you guys would go ahead and check it out. But without further ado, let's get this video started. And starting out the Arizona Cardinals, I think their breakout player is going to be Isaiah Simmons. Last year, he had a pretty up and down rookie season because to start off the season, he didn't get a whole lot of playing time. The Cardinals just didn't know how to really use him. They're just trying to find out, how to use him, and they're trying to find out, where to put him as a player because back at Clemson, he was all used all over the field, and I mean, he played cornerback, safety, linebacker. I mean, he was all over the field, to put it simply. But as the season went on, Isaiah Simmons really improved as a player. He got more playing time, and Arizona was finally able to, find the answers to some of the questions they had at the beginning of the season. They finally found out where to put him, and they finally found out, how to use him as a player. And next year, I think he should, in this upcoming NFL season, I should say, I think he's going to have a really good season. I think his success from the second half of last year should be able to carry over into 2021, and I'm super excited to see how he does. And I also do want to add on, before we move on to the Atlanta Falcons, that the 2021 offseason was not as weird as the 2020 offseason, and that kind of just adds on to his case to be a breakout player, and I'm super excited to see how he does next year. For the Atlanta Falcons, I'm going to go with Russell Gage. Now, last year, Julio Jones obviously missed a significant portion of the year due to an injury, and this caused Russell Gage to really step up, and he had a career season with 786 receiving yards and 4 receiving touchdowns. So in a way, last year was his breakout season. But with Julio Jones no longer in town, I think Russ is bound to have an even bigger role this season, considering the fact that he's going to get a much bigger role in the offense. And the Falcons, while they did draft Kyle Pitts in this past year's NFL draft, I think Russell Gage is still going to get quite a bit of targets, and I think he's going to have a massive role in the offense. As I said before, I think he's going to be the number 2 wide receiver next to Calvin Ridley, and honestly, I would not be too shocked if he were to have over 900 receiving yards next year, and maybe even 1,000 receiving yards. I'm super excited to see how Russell Gage does, and unless you're playing against me, pick him up in fantasy football if you guys do fantasy football. For the Baltimore Ravens, I got Marquis Brown. Now, originally, I was going to do J.K. Dobbins like a lot of people. However, when I was writing this script, he got injured, and I feel like Marquis Brown was kind of the next closest guy to being Baltimore's big breakout player. And a lot of people expected him to break out last year in 2020, and while he did take a leap in his play, it wasn't as big as many people thought it was. However, to wrap up 2020, he was on an absolute tear, and he was really good in the second half of last season. And hey, that is something you really like to see if you are a Baltimore Ravens fan, or if you're just the Baltimore Ravens in general. And Marquis Brown next year, I think he's going to take another step in his game. Part of it's basically just natural improvement, and part of it's also, just him, having a much better supporting cast around him, because he won't have as much pressure and really just as much responsibility in that wide receiving core now that he has guys like Rashad Bateman and Sammy Watkins to, just take pressure off of him. And next year, I think Marquis Brown, he's going to get a lot of touchdowns because he was a touchdown machine to end last year, and along with that, I think he's going to have over 950 receiving yards, and maybe he does hit 1,000 receiving yards. We'll just have to wait and see. For the Buffalo Bills, I'm going to go with Ed Oliver. Ed Oliver had, in the 2019 NFL draft, he was one of the most hyped up prospects coming out of Houston. In his rookie year, it was pretty decent, and a lot of people expected him to break out last year in 2020. However, that was not the case. He had a really disappointing and really mid-sophomore year. 2021, it's going to be his 3rd year in the league, and I think it's going to be a really big year for him. And I most definitely think this could be the year that he does put it all together and, just has his big breakout year. All right, I mean, he has the physical tools to be a good player, and defensive tackles a lot of times take a year or two to get used to the league, so maybe he just needs some time. The Bills, they did add Gregory Rousseau and Carlos Basham to that defensive line, so hopefully that does help him out. And I also do want to add that Star Lutuli, hopefully I said his name right, he is going to be coming back, so after opting out last year, so hopefully if he does play well, that's also going to relieve even more pressure off Ed Oliver. Next year, it could definitely be Ed Oliver's year, and I still believe in him. I know a lot of people have kind of, given up on him, but I think he can definitely still be a really good player. For the Carolina Panthers, I'm going to go with Derrick Brown. Derrick Brown had a really good rookie season, and he made a name for himself as a really good run stopper. Now, his pass rushing stats were not exactly the best, but as I said before, defensive tackles do take time to get used to the league, and Derrick Brown, I don't think we've seen the best from him yet, you know? Heading into 2021, he's going to have a year of experience under his belt, and because of that, I think he's going to, you know, kind of naturally improve as a player, given the fact that he's more experienced. And along with that, the Carolina Panthers did add edge rusher Hassan Reddick to their defensive line, and that's going to help relieve pressure off of Derrick Brown. And along with that, Brian Burns, he continues to get better, and that's going to relieve even more pressure off of him. And Derrick Brown, I think he's going to be great next season, and I mean, I would not be surprised if he made the Pro Bowl and had a great season. For the Chicago Bears, I'm going to go with Darnell Mooney. Darnell Mooney had a pretty good rookie season with 631 yards and 4 touchdowns, and we got to keep in mind, he had really bad quarterback play. I think he's kind of naturally going to get better given the fact that he's more experienced, and if Justin Fields takes over around like week 4, 5, or 6, and he's the player a lot of people think he can be, that'll make things even better for Darnell. I expect at least 750 receiving yards from him, and I think he's a pretty clear-cut picking away for the Bears breakout player, and I'm pretty excited to see how Darnell Mooney does next season. For the Cincinnati Bengals, I'm going to go ahead and pick Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow last season was pretty good up until he suffered a season-ending injury versus the Washington football team. While he does have his issues when it comes to his deep ball passing, he was pretty good, and he was a top 3 offensive rookie of the year candidate before he got injured, as I said before. I think he's going to have a monster year in 2021. First off, look at his weapons. He has a top 10 to 12 running back in Joe Mixon, an amazing wide receiving core consisting of Tyler Boyd, T. Higgins, and Jamar Chase, and a not too bad tight end in CJ Uzomah. Combine that with, I think, natural improvement from Joe, I think this man is going to have over 4,000 passing yards and over 26 passing touchdowns in this upcoming NFL year. Now, I will say that it is pretty dependent on the Bengals offensive line, you know, being average at the very least, because that has to happen if Joe Burrow does want to take this big leap, and I think it's possible that the offensive line does reach that mark of being at least average. And I gotta say, the Bengals, they may not be the best team in the league in this upcoming NFL year, but they will be a really fun team to watch. For the Cleveland Browns, I'm going to go with Ronnie Harrison. I'll admit, it was really difficult thinking of who I think the Browns' breakout player would be, but I eventually chose Ronnie Harrison. Despite Cleveland's defense being pretty bad last season, individually, Ronnie Harrison had a really good year himself, despite the unit being pretty bad overall. However, Cleveland, they did sign guys like John Johnson and Troy Hill and Jadeveon Clowney in free agency to help bolster that defense, and along with that, they did select Greg Newsome and Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah in the first 2 rounds of the NFL draft this past year, and guys like Greedy Williams and Grant Delpit will be returning from injury, and the help around him is going to be much improved, and that's one reason why I think he is going to take some leaps in his game next year. And along with that, I think he will take natural strides, and well, again, I think it was really difficult picking Cleveland's breakout player, but Ronnie Harrison, I mean, I feel like he was kind of the closest thing to Cleveland's breakout player. For the Dallas Cowboys, I'm going to go with CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb last year was able to catch 74 passes for 935 yards and 5 touchdowns last year, despite Dak Prescott being out a majority of the year. Although he does play on a really stacked wide receiving core, I think he's going to have a great 2021 season. A healthy Dak Prescott will help him, as Dak Prescott was on pace to throw for over 6,000 yards before his injury, and I would not be too surprised if Lamb does make his mark as a wide receiver 1 over Amari Cooper, or at least makes like a real debate between who's better. CeeDee Lamb, he was already great with pretty bad quarterback play for a majority of last season, and I expect him to have over 1,000 receiving yards and 5 receiving touchdowns in 2021, given the fact that he should naturally get better as a player with more experience, and you'll hopefully play with the healthy Dak Prescott. For the Denver Broncos, I'm going to pick Jerry Jeudy. Jerry Jeudy had a really good rookie season, logging in 856 yards and 3 touchdowns. Now, he did have his drop issues, but to be fair, he had terrible quarterback play, so that certainly hurt his numbers. In 2021, though, the star wideout Courtland Sutton will be returning after missing a majority of last year with an injury, and along with that, the quarterback play should improve as the Broncos, they did acquire Teddy Bridgewater in the offseason, and while he's not necessarily like a big play, aggressive quarterback, he can manage a game for you, and he's pretty good at just checking it down in the short and intermediate game. And Jerry Jeudy, he is a great route runner, and he can work the short and intermediate, areas very well, and because of that, I think he'll have a good connection with with Teddy Bridgewater. And hey, Drew Lock could certainly improve after a horrendous second year if he does get playing time. And Jerry Jeudy, I think he should naturally improve, and with better quarterback play and a great player in Courtland Sutton, returning to help relieve pressure off of him, I think Jerry Jeudy is going to take another big leap in his play with over 1,000 receiving yards and 5 touchdowns next year. For the Detroit Lions, I'm going to pick Deandre Swift. This one I feel like is pretty clear-cut. Deandre Swift had a really solid rookie year as he showed a lot of promise, notching in 521 yards and 8 touchdowns on the ground, while also averaging 4.6 yards a run, and he had 357 yards and 2 touchdowns through the air. Jared Goff, he's a really average quarterback, and the Lions have a really lackluster wide receiving core. Because of that, the Lions, I think, will have a run-first offense with Deandre Swift as the lead back. Deandre will play behind an absolute brick wall of an offensive line with guys like Frank Ragnow, Taylor Decker, and generational offensive lineman prospect in Penei Sewell blocking for him. Along with that, Swift, he can catch passes as well, and considering the lackluster wide receiving core, as I said before, I think he will get the opportunity to do a lot of damage through the air. So if you're playing fantasy football, you got to try and get your hands on this guy. And Deandre Swift, I think he is going to be amazing next season. For the Green Bay Packers, I'm going to go with A.J. Dillon. I'll admit, it was tough coming up with Green Bay's breakout player, but ultimately I chose A.J. Dillon. Last year, A.J. had 242 rushing yards and 2 rushing touchdowns, all while averaging 5 yards a carry. Now, with Jamal Williams gone, A.J. Dillon should slide into that RB2 role, and I think he will get a lot more reps. And I don't think he'll have over 1,000 rushing yards, but I think something like 700 to 800 rushing yards and 4 rushing touchdowns isn't too unrealistic, and I think he will take a decent leap in his play next year, and I don't think he's going to be taking the running back 1 duties. That belongs to Aaron Jones, but AJ Dillon, I think he should have a pretty big year. For the Houston Texans, I'm going to go with Charles Omenihu. I know a lot of people are just going to talk about how bad Houston is whenever you bring up the Texans, but that does not mean they won't have a breakout player. Charles Omenihu quietly had a pretty good season with 4 sacks and 21 pressures last year. Keep in mind, this guy only played 49% of the defensive snaps. I think Charles will probably slide into a starting spot on that Texans defensive line, given the fact that the JJ Watt is no longer on the team, and it looks like Houston is just going to try and find some of the cornerstones for their team this year and really just give most of the playing time to the young guys. If I had to give a rough stat prediction, I think something like 7 to 8 sacks is not too unrealistic to go along with numerous pressures. Charles Omenihu, I think he's going to have a really big season no matter how bad Houston is. For the Indianapolis Colts, I'm going to pick Michael Pittman Jr. Michael Pittman Jr.'s rookie year wasn't exactly the greatest by any means, but he was pretty solid and he played very well in the second half of the year. We also should take into account that he did deal with injuries in his rookie year, and injuries, again, they can hinder pretty much everyone. I think he should naturally get better as he gets more experience, and with how good he was in the second half of last year, I think he's going to get more reps next year, and if Carson Wentz can stay healthy for a majority of the year, Indy should be a more pass-first offense, and that's going to help Mike a lot. And we should also add that T.Y. Hilton will be miss some time with an injury, and that means more targets for Michael Pittman Jr. For the Jacksonville Jaguars, I'm going to go with Laviska Shenault. Now, this was really tough because there's a lot of guys you can put as Jacksonville's breakout player. If you have someone like a K'Lavon Chaisson or a C.J. Henderson here, I can't blame you, I really can't. But I decided to go with Laviska Shenault. Alright, last season, he had a really good rookie year with 600 yards and 5 touchdowns. And keep in mind, he had pretty bad quarterback play and was pretty much in the worst situation possible because he played for the Jacksonville Jaguars, and last year, they were obviously the worst team in the NFL, and that hurt wideouts like him and Laviska and DJ Chark. Now they got Trevor Lawrence tossing them the rock, and I think he's going to have a pretty good rookie year. And assuming Trevor Lawrence plays well, I think Laviska Shenault is going to have a pretty good year with over at least 800 receiving yards and 5 receiving touchdowns, and he will make his name as one of the top receiving options in Duval. For the Kansas City Chiefs, I'm going to go with Mecole Hardman. Last year, I expected Mecole Hardman to break out, and he disappointed a lot of people with only 560 receiving yards and 4 receiving touchdowns. KC, they have 2 of the best offensive playmakers in the league with Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce, but they could really use a wide receiver 2 alongside Tyreek Hill, and I think this should be the year that Mecole Hardman does take a big leap and has over 750 receiving yards and 4 touchdowns. He's going to have quite a bit of pressure this year to break out, and hey, if he does take that next step, maybe he does get a payday from Kansas City. I don't know if they do it, but hey, maybe he does. Hopefully he doesn't disappoint me this year. Well, kind of unfortunately, because, I mean, if he does disappoint, at least it'll increase the chances of my Patriots winning the Super Bowl this year. But yeah, Mecole Hardman, I definitely think he can break out this year, and I guess hopefully he does. For the Las Vegas Raiders, I'm going to pick Henry Ruggs. HR3 had a really underwhelming rookie year with only 452 yards and 2 touchdowns. However, Nelson Agholor, he did depart from my New England Patriots in free agency, and I think that's really going to open up a lot of opportunities for him. I definitely could see him sliding into that wide receiver 1 spot. Along with that, Henry will be a much more experienced player, and his experience is very valuable, and hopefully does become a big part of John Gruden's offense, and he has a big year. And along with that, he has been doing some serious training in the offseason, so hopefully that does pay off for him. For the Los Angeles Chargers, I'm going to pick Jerry Tillery. Now, Jerry Tillery was a first-round pick back in the 2019 NFL Draft, and so far, he hasn't exactly produced like a first-rounder. However, to be fair, a lot of interior defensive linemen do take time to get used to the league, and he did improve last year. While he didn't break out per se, he did improve as a player. The number of pressures he had in 2019, went up from 3 all the way up to 22 in 2020. 2 years, I do think it should be enough experience to get used to the pros and just put it all together and really come into your own. And the Chargers' new head coach Brandon Staley, he is a great defensive mind. I think he can get the most out of the defensive players on this squad. 2021, it's going to be a big make or break season for Jerry, and the money incentive could also be a big factor in how he plays next year, because if he does play very well next year, the Chargers will consider just extending him and giving that big mega extension that I'm sure all NFL players dream of. For the Los Angeles Rams, I'm going to pick Jordan Fuller. Now, it was kind of difficult coming up with the Rams breakout player, but I decided to go with Jordan Fuller. His rookie year, it was solid with 3 interceptions and 5 pass deflections in 12 games. However, he did allow a 99 passer rating when targeted, and hey, he was a rookie, I will say that. The Rams, they did lose John Johnson in free agency this past year, and I think Jordan will be a starter because of that, and he's going to be a more experienced player. And the Rams pass rush, it's very good, and because of that, the secondary, they won't be left on an island for too long, and that's going to help out players like, Jalen Ramsey, obviously, and of course, Jordan Fuller. And I think Jordan Fuller next year, I think he will improve a lot as a player with that experience, and he's going to get a lot more playing time given the fact that, well, John Johnson's no longer there, and I'm pretty excited to see how he does. For the Miami Dolphins, I'm going to pick Tua Tagovailoa. Now, Tua had a pretty mediocre rookie year, and a lot of people have already written him off. Now, even as a Patriots fan, I still think he has potential, and I think he will break out in 2021, and I think he is pretty overhated and over-scrutinized. Tua, he had a lot of obstacles in his rookie year, and he's going to be fully healthy, more experienced, and will have a much better supporting cast in this upcoming season. To add on, he looked pretty good in the preseason, and while it is just preseason, it's still nice to see, that type of progress, and he definitely looked like a much better quarterback. Tua, he's going to be a much better next year in my opinion. I think he's going to improve a lot. The Minnesota Vikings, I'm going to pick Cameron Dantzler. Now, I wanted to go with Irv Smith Jr., but he has an injury, and, that's kind of going to hinder his, campaign this year. So I decided to go with Cameron Dantzler because I feel like he was kind of like the next, best guy to pick here. Cameron Dantzler last year was not exactly the best, but he was a rookie, and rookies, corners, they do take time to get used to the league, and he definitely showed improvement throughout the year, and hey, that's something you really like to see if you are the Minnesota Vikings. And the Vikings, their defense, it's going to be healthy next year. Danielle Hunter, he is going to greatly improve that pass rush, and because of that, the entire secondary, it is going to be helped out. And along with that, the Vikings, they added Patrick Peterson and Bashaud Breeland to the cornerback room, and they are great veteran presences who I think will at the very least be good veteran leaders for this team, and they can teach Cam a thing or two about, how to be a good NFL corner. And along with that, they are pretty solid players themselves, so they can help relieve pressure off of Cameron Dantzler. For the New England Patriots, I'm going to pick Damien Harris. Damien Harris did not play a whole lot in his rookie year, but he had a really strong sophomore campaign, as in 10 games, he had 691 rushing yards and 2 rushing touchdowns, all while averaging 5 yards a run. The Patriots, they have a really deep backfield and will still have a running back committee system, but I think Damien Harris is going to get a majority of the carries and a majority of the reps, and I think he's just going to be the running back one, to put it simply. If he stays healthy, I think he'll have at least 850 rushing yards, and along with that, the Patriots will probably have run the ball a lot, and because of that, that's going to really help out running backs like Damien Harris. And I gotta say, as a Patriots fan, I am super excited to see how Damien Harris does next year. For the New Orleans Saints, I'm going to go with Marquez Callaway. Now, the Saints' breakout player, in my opinion, is most likely going to be Marquez Callaway or Tre'Quan Smith. I decided to go with Marquez Callaway because he showed a lot of promise in the preseason, and while it is just preseason, it's still nice to see that, and it seems like he's got a nice connection with Jameis Winston. Michael Thomas, he's going to miss like the first 6 or 7 games of the season with an injury, and that'll mean he's going to get guys like Tre'Quan Smith and Marquez Callaway will get a lot of targets, and they're going to get the opportunity to really shine. Tre'Quan Smith, I don't think he's a bad option as the Saints breakout player either, but ultimately I went with Marquez Callaway because of that connection with Jameis Winston. But again, if you have Tre'Quan Smith here, I can see why. For the New York Giants, I'm going to pick Dexter Lawrence. Dexter Lawrence was a first-round pick back in the 2019 NFL Draft, and last year he really started to come into his own alongside Leonard Williams. His ability to rush the passer, it's solid, not the best in the world, but it's still solid, and he's a really good run stopper. 2021, it will be a very big season for him, and I think New York, they're going to look for him to take the next step as a player, and I think he will take the next step as a player, as you guys can tell since he's on this list. Daniel Jones, he's also not a bad option at all. I can see why you'd put him here, but personally, while I do think Daniel Jones will be much better than he was last year, I think Daniel Jones, I still got concerns about the offensive line, and that could really hinder Daniel Jones' progress, but nonetheless, I got Dexter Lawrence here at the spot. For the New York Jets, I'm going to go with Quinnen Williams. Last year, you could say was Quinnen Williams' breakout season, but I chose him here because I think 2021, he is going to be a beast. Alright, the Jets, they really improved that front seven, and they really did improve that defense. Now, Carl Lawson, unfortunately, he's gonna miss the entire season with an injury. However, the Jets did add Sheldon Rankins in free agency, and Robert Saleh is a defensive-minded head coach, and he's a really big reason why I think Quinnen Williams will be an absolute beast next year, because I think, the fact that he's so defensive-minded and, the fact that he's such a good defensive mind, I think he will be able to utilize guys like Quinnen Williams on this defense, very well, and I think he's gonna get the most out of Quinnen Williams. And honestly, I think Quinnen is going to have at least 10 sacks to go next year, to go along with numerous tackles for a loss and numerous pressures. Denzel Mims, I can also see him breaking out, but ultimately I went with Quinnen Williams. For the Philadelphia Eagles, I'm going to pick Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts stepped in as Philly's starting quarterback late in the season due to the fact that Carson Wentz was really struggling, to say the least. And Hurts, while he was pretty up and down, he definitely showed promise, and it was pretty impressive because he did have some real positives despite the fact that he had a really lackluster supporting cast. And there's no denying Jalen Hurts, he has things he has to work on in his second year, but he'll get a normal offseason to work on his game, and he'll have a much better supporting cast. The Eagles offensive line, it will have a healthy Brendan Brooks and Lane Johnson in 2021, and because of that, I think it will get back to being one of the better lines in the league. And they did upgrade the receiving corps, selecting the reigning Heisman winner in Devonta Smith. And Jalen Hurts, while he will have competition with guys like Gardner Minshew and Joe Flacco, I think he will be the starter the entire year, and that could definitely motivate him to play well. And he's a really good leader, and I think he's a guy who works hard. And he's even said that he's okay with the competition because it motivates him, and I think he will take strides as a player. Devonta Smith, Jalen Reagor, and possibly more guys in that receiving core have good seasons in the line. They play up to their talent level. Then Jalen Hurts, he could definitely have a big year. For the Pittsburgh Steelers, I'm going to pick Chase Claypool. Chase Claypool was one of the best rookie wide receivers last year with over 800 yards and 9 touchdowns. This guy, he was on a tear to start out the year, but the Steelers' old offensive coordinator, Randy Fichtner, he alienated him from the offense in the later part of the year, and that really hurt his production and his stats. However, the Steelers, they did get rid of their old offensive coordinator, and they promoted Matt Canada, and I think he should be a much better than Randy Fichtner. I also do think Chase Claypool should naturally get better as a player, and even though the Steelers have a loaded wide receiving room, I do think Chase Claypool will emerge as that #1 guy on the team, and he's going to have over 1,000 yards and 7 touchdowns in 2021. For the San Francisco 49ers, I'm going to go ahead and pick Brandon Ayuk. Staying on the topic of sophomore wide receivers heading into this year, I think Brandon Ayuk is going to be the 49ers breakout player. Like Chase Claypool, he's one of the best rookie wideouts last year with over 700 yards and 5 touchdowns despite missing 4 games. Keep in mind, this guy didn't even have Jimmy Garoppolo tossing him the rock most of the year. Hopefully Jimmy Garoppolo is healthy because Ayuk should have a really good season if the quarterback play he gets is just decent at the very least. Like a lot of young players, he should also get better as he gains more experience. And Brandon Ayuk, he's going to be really good next year, and I think he will break the 1,000 yard mark. For the Seattle Seahawks, I'm going to pick Jordan Brooks. Jordan Brooks' rookie year wasn't the best by any means, and he struggled mildly to start off the 2020, but as the year went on, Jordan improved a lot as a player, and that's something you love to see when it comes to rookies and young players in general, to be honest. And he got a normal offseason in 2021, and that should help him a lot considering the fact that he got way more in-person activities, and the 2020 offseason, it was super weird. I do think his improvement in the second half of last season should carry over into 2021, and I expect him to have a really, really good year. For the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I'm going to go with Antoine Winfield Jr. Antoine Winfield Jr. had a solid rookie year. He had his really good moments, but at the same time, he had some terrible moments. However, overall, he was a fine player. Antoine Winfield Jr., he's going to be heading into this upcoming season with a year of experience under his belt, and I think that experience should really help him a lot, and I think next year he's going to really just be a more consistent player and just flat out be a much better player, and I'm pretty excited to see how he does next season. For the Tennessee Titans, I'm going to pick Jeffrey Simmons. Jeffrey Simmons was a first-round pick back in the 2019 NFL Draft, like some of the other guys on this list, and he showed a lot of growth as a player last year. And in the offseason, the Titans really bolstered that front seven as they signed guys like Bud Dupree and Nico Autry. The additional help is really going to help take pressure off of Jeff, and he should be able to improve naturally as a player. I think he's going to get set a career high in sacks and tackles for a loss, and I just feel like this is the year that Jeffrey Simmons finally breaks out and really just puts it all together. And the final team we got is a Washington football team, and I'm going to pick Antonio Gibson. Antonio Gibson really showed out in the second half of last year and finished his rookie campaign with nearly 800 yards and 11 rushing touchdowns, and he had 200 receiving yards as well. AG, he is going to get a lot of opportunity in 2021, and I think he's going to be a monster. Not only can he run the ball very well, but he's a fantastic receiving back as well. And in his college days at Memphis, he was basically a running back wide receiver hybrid, and I hope Washington, utilizes both his strengths, when it comes to rushing the ball and running the ball, because Antonio Gibson, he's just a really versatile player. Next season, he's going to be such a fun player to watch, and I wouldn't be super shocked if he, had a Pro Bowl caliber season. With that being said, that is going to be it for today's video. Thank you guys so much for watching. It really means a lot to me. If you guys enjoyed, hit that like button as it really helps out the channel. And also make sure to subscribe if you guys are new and enjoy this type of content so you don't miss out on any new videos like this. Plus, we are on the road to 1,000 subscribers, and once we hit our goal, I am finally going to do a face reveal. But without further ado, I'm out, you guys.